Hey fam, this is the Potter Show. Today's story is gonna blow your mind. What if Harry ran to Gringotts at age 7 and one blood test made him the most powerful lord in Britain? Show some love with a like and subscribe. Here we go. Chapter 1, The Contingency. The steps of Gringotts were cold at dawn. Not uncomfortable cold, the kind of cold that clarifies things, that strips the surplus away and leaves only the necessary. Harry had been sitting on the second step from the bottom for 20 minutes, counting the cobblestones in the road below, and the cold had worked its way through his jeans and the oversized jumper and the thin windbreaker that had been Dudley's 2 summers ago and was still Dudley's in every way except possession. His back was straight, his hands were in his lap. He was not shaking, though his body wanted to. The split lip had stopped bleeding somewhere around Waterloo Bridge. He had not planned Gringotts. He had not, if he was honest, planned anything beyond the end of Privet Drive, which he had reached at 11:30 the previous night with blood drying on his collar and the specific animal clarity that comes when a body decides, below the level of thought, that this particular room is no longer survivable. The cupboard door had not been locked. Vernon had not locked it last night, whether from oversight or some private logic Harry didn't have access to, and Harry had simply pushed it open and walked out of the house and kept walking, because stopping meant returning, and returning was something his legs refused. He had sixpence. He had lifted it from Dudley's change jar in the kitchen, the one Dudley kept for the arcade and never monitored because there was always more. He had the windbreaker, he had nothing else, which was more or less what he owned. He had walked through the night. London at midnight was not frightening to him in any way the Dursleys would have understood. The dark was familiar and strangers did not hit him, and the city's particular indifference was not hostile, just structural. He moved east along the Thames, following it the way water follows gravity, because east was the direction of the city's density, the press of old things, and old things had always interested him more than new ones. He stopped once under a railway bridge to watch 2 pigeons dispute a chip. He ate nothing. There was nothing to eat. Somewhere before dawn, in a narrow passage off Charing Cross Road, the street had changed. He had noticed the woman first. She was walking ahead of him, briefcase in one hand, takeaway coffee in the other, wearing the kind of office clothes that meant early shift or late shift, and she was too tired to know the difference anymore. She walked into a wall, not into a wall, and bounced off into the wall, her shoulder finding a gap that Harry's eyes said wasn't there, her body carrying through the solid Victorian brick as if it had asked nicely and been let in. Coffee didn't even slosh. Harry stopped. He looked at the wall. He walked toward it slowly, the way you walk toward a dog you don't know, and when he got close enough, the wall let him see the alley, which had been there the whole time and which he simply hadn't been able to perceive from a distance, and the alley led to a street that looked like a set from a film that hadn't quite decided what century it was set in. 2 men in robes stood outside a pub with green fire in the window, arguing about portkey authorization in voices that carried the specific register of 2 people who are very tired of each other. A woman floated 3 boxes onto a cart with a wave of a stick, not looking at them. The building at the end was white the way bones are white, not reflective, not painted, but radiating a kind of non-color that came from inside the stone and made the building look like it had been there before everything else and had simply allowed everything else to grow up around it. Columns flanking wide bronze doors, steps leading up, and at the top of the steps 2 guards. They were not human. Harry understood this immediately and without drama, the way you understand a very obvious fact you haven't yet been given words for. They were shorter than a man, longer in the face and the hand, and they stood with an absolute physical stillness that made the doormen outside Harrods look fidgety. They held weapons that might have been spears and might have been something worse, and they were watching Harry come up the road with the alert, expressionless attention of something that had evaluated every person who had ever walked up those steps and had developed opinions. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. The city behind him went about its business. The guards did not move. He walked up. "Name," said the one on the left, not a shout, not aggressive. The flat, functional demand of a system identifying its inputs. Harry Potter. Both guards went still in a way that was different from their previous stillness. The previous stillness had been professional. This one was something else, a cessation like the pause between the lightning and the thunder when the charge is still traveling. The one on the right turned its head 3 degrees to the left, a bird movement, a listening movement. Then it stepped back from the door and placed 2 fingers against the bronze, and the door opened inward on gold light that should not have been as warm as it was, given everything. "Wait here," said the guard. Its voice was the same as before, flat, functional, but there was now a subtext running underneath the surface of the words, the way cold water runs underneath ice, not hostile. Something more careful than hostile, Harry stepped inside and waited. The hall was its own argument about the nature of wealth. Not the kind of argument made with excess, with gold leaf and chandeliers and the performance of luxury that the Dursleys did with their new kitchen and their better car. This was the argument made with certainty. The marble floors were the marble of something that had been here for 1,000 years and expected to be here for 1,000 more and did not need your approval to achieve this. The teller windows ran the full length of both walls, 17 visible before the columns interrupted the sightline, and every one of them was occupied by a creature like the door guards, short, dense, working with the focused intensity of professionals who find inefficiency genuinely offensive. The sound was the sound of a machine that ran 24 hours because money doesn't sleep and neither does the keeping of it. Quills on paper, the click of counting instruments, the distant percussion of vaults, far below, receiving and releasing what they held. Harry stood 3 feet inside the door. He was aware of being out of place the way a foreign body is out of place, not unwelcome exactly, but registered. Several of the nearest tellers had looked at him. They had done their evaluation and they had gone back to work, which told him that they had found something in the evaluation worth reporting to someone else rather than acting on themselves. The creature who came for him emerged from behind the leftmost column and crossed the teller rows without acknowledging any of them. It was older than the door guards. Harry read age in the density of it, the way the leather of its face had been worked past flexibility into something permanent. Its hair was white and cropped, its eyes were amber, and they moved across Harry's face with the speed and completeness of a scan rather than a look. "You are Harry James Potter," it said. "Yes. You came here alone." "Yes." The amber eyes took one deliberate inventory of the split lip, the swollen orbit of his left eye that had completed its transition to purple overnight, the windbreaker with its broken zip, the 2 large jeans held at the waist by a strip of electrical tape threaded through 2 of the 5 belt loops. It said nothing about any of it. It said, "My name is Gryffindor. I am an account teller. Please follow me." The diagnostic chamber was down the left corridor. Past a room Harry could hear was mechanical and a room he could not hear at all. Past a heavy door stenciled heritage assessment. Restricted bloodline verification only, and through that door into a small stone room with walls the color of old iron and no windows and a single oil lamp that made the shadows precise rather than diffuse. In the center of the room, a basin, stone roughly the size of a bird bath, perfectly round. Filled with something silver that moved like mercury but was not mercury. It moved with intention, the way water moves in a current. Beside it on a stand of black iron, a needle no longer than a matchstick. "This is a heritage assessment chamber," Gryffindor said. He stood at the far wall with his hands behind his back. Every Gringotts branch maintains one under the founding compact of 1397. The compact stipulates that any magical heir presenting at the doors unguarded, unaccompanied, and bearing signs of magical suppression is to be offered a bloodline verification at no cost to the heir. A pause. "You are 7 years old, you are bearing injuries, you arrived without an adult, the conditions are met." Harry looked at the needle. "Magical suppression," he said. "A child of your bloodline should not have reached the age of 7 without having been registered with this institution," Gryffindor said. "The fact that you have not been registered suggests that someone took deliberate steps to prevent it. The diagnostic will confirm whether there are suppressant enchantments on your core." He looked at Harry's hands. "May I?" Harry held out his right hand. Gryffindor took it with 2 fingers, turned it palm up, and ran the needle across the pad of Harry's index finger in a single precise movement. It hurt sharply and briefly, like a paper cut from something colder and more intentional than paper. Gryffindor held Harry's hand over the basin and 3 drops of blood fell. They hit the silver and the silver moved. Not dissolved, moved purposefully, the blood spreading through it in channels that were not random, describing characters in the basin floor that were not quite any alphabet Harry could identify. His eyes kept sliding off the symbols the way eyes slide off optical illusions. He stared at the nearest one directly and it skated sideways in his vision. The 3 oil lamps in the room went out. The basin glowed. It was not a light that illuminated the room. It was a light that illuminated what was in the basin and nothing else, and it was the deep blue-white of something that has been generating its own light for a very long time and does not need a source. Harry stood beside the basin in near dark and looked at the characters moving in the glow, and behind him he heard Gryffindor make a sound so small it was barely a sound, a sharp intake, immediately controlled. Then Gryffindor's footsteps crossed the stone floor and the door opened and he was gone. Harry stayed. The basin kept writing. He watched it. 2 minutes. 3. The door opened again, and the feet this time were different, slower, heavier, certain, and a lamp came with them, and the room reassembled itself around its new occupant. The goblin who stood at the basin's other edge was older than Griffith the way a mountain range is older than a hill. His face had been past flexibility for decades and had settled into something more permanent than expression, a carved quality, the face of someone for whom the world's surprises had run out and what remained was management. He was wearing the same dark Gringotts uniform as Griffith, but his shoulders carried it differently, the way authority is a thing you eventually stop putting on and simply are. He read the basin. His eyes tracked the characters with the speed of fluency. He read for 32 seconds, Harry counted, and he did not react to any of it except in one precise way. When he reached a particular set of characters in the lower right quadrant of the basin floor, his breathing changed by a fraction that Harry would not have noticed if he hadn't been watching very carefully. Mr. Potter, the goblin said, I am Ragnarok. I am Senior Director of Gringotts, London. He looked up. I am going to need approximately 4 minutes of your attention. After that, we will arrange food. Do you have questions before I begin? Is the needle? Harry glanced at the stand. Is that going back in? No, then no. Good. Ragnarok turned back to the basin. He spoke without looking up, the way someone recites from memory, not because they don't know it, but because they want to recite it accurately, and looking at the source text helps. The bloodline verification has confirmed 3 active lines of hereditary magical inheritance. The first is Potter, primary direct descent. The second is Black through your paternal grandmother Doria Potter, born Black, under the Black Succession Charter of 1709. The Black Lordship is currently in abeyance, the last recognized lord having died in a manner classified as wartime casualty in 1985. You are the nearest confirmed heir under the charter. He moved his lamp. The third line is Peveril. He stopped there. Not for dramatic effect, he stopped because he was deciding how to say the next part. The Peveril line has not produced a verified heir in 112 years, he said. You are the convergent heir. The convergence was predicted by the terms of the original Peveril succession binding in 1278, which specified that the line would eventually concentrate into a single blood point. It has been waiting, he straightened. The verification of a convergent heir triggers automatic vault seal breaks across all 3 lines simultaneously. Those breaks began 8 minutes ago. They will complete within the hour. Harry thought through this. What does that mean for me practically? Ragnarok looked at him. Most 7-year-olds he had encountered, which was, admittedly, not many, asked what does that mean in the register of overwhelming information. This one asked practically, and the word meant something. Practically, Ragnarok said, it means 3 things in immediate order of importance. First, you have legal hereditary standing that predates any administrative arrangement made for you by any third party. That standing takes precedence over those arrangements. Second, you have 3 seats on the Wisengamot, that is the governing body of magical Britain, something like a parliament, which have been held in abeyance pending heir verification. Third, you have properties and financial holdings of significant scale, also held in trust. He paused. Additionally, the bloodwork has confirmed what I suspected from the door report. There are 4 suppression enchantments on your magical core. They have been there since you were approximately 15 months old. The room was quiet except for the distant sound of the vaults and the silver still moving in the basin. Someone, Harry said, put something on me to stop my magic. Yes, when I was a baby, yes. So I couldn't use it. He thought about this with the focused, neutral attention of someone who has a lot of practice not reacting to bad news in front of other people. Who? We are in the process of determining authorship, Ragnarok said. The signature on the suppression enchantments will require our curse-breaking team to fully analyze. However, he reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. He spread it on the stone edge of the basin. This is a filing made with this institution in November of 1981, 6 weeks after your parents' deaths. It establishes your guardianship with your mother's sister and her husband, in contravention of your parents' stated wishes, which named Sirius Black as your sole guardian. This filing was processed through the office of the Chief Warlock of the Wisengamot, which position is currently held by Albus Dumbledore. Harry looked at the document. His own name was in it, misspelled. Harry James Potter, 2 instances, as if whoever filed it had never needed to read it carefully. He put me with them, Harry said. Yes, my parents didn't want that. No, and the account manager here, the one who managed my parents' money, they didn't know. Ragnar's expression shifted by a degree that was not visible so much as felt. Your parents' account manager was informed. The filing was executed under emergency wartime provisions that technically superseded normal notification requirements. The manager challenged it. The challenge was rejected by the chief warlock's office. A pause. Your manager retired the following year, prematurely. Harry straightened. His back had been straight for the whole conversation, but he straightened it further now, the way something calibrates when it has confirmed a calculation. And my godfather, he said, Sirius Black, my parents named him. He is currently imprisoned in Azkaban. The installation on the island, it's a prison. Ragnar said this without inflection because inflection would have been editorial and Ragnar was not an editor. Was he convicted? There was no trial. Harry looked at the basin. The silver was still moving, still writing, still documenting the exact weight of what he was, the full hereditary consequence of 3 drops of blood on cold silver. He was aware peripherally of what he should be feeling, had some model of it, built from watching Dudley's reactions to bad news, petunias, the children at school who cried when they were hurt. He was not doing any of that. What he was doing was something quieter and more structural, a rearrangement of load-bearing elements, the kind of work that happens below the surface where it doesn't show until it's done. What happens now, he said, it was not quite a question. Now, Ragnar said, the contingency protocol executes. Filed in December of 1982 by the junior account manager assigned to the Potter Trust after the challenge rejection, before his removal. The protocol designates Gringotts as provisional legal guardian for any unaccompanied Potter heir who presents at this institution bearing signs of magical suppression and physical harm, pending formal legal establishment. It was designed for exactly this scenario. He held Harry's gaze across the basin. It is not optional for either of us. You are under goblin protection, that is what it means. That works for me, Harry said. Ragnar regarded him for 3 seconds. You are not going to argue, no, or ask to call someone. I don't want to call anyone on Privet Drive, Harry said, and I don't know anyone else. You know us now, Ragnar said. He folded the filing document back into his jacket. Follow me. The green parlor smelled of something mineral and warm, the geological comfort of deep rooms that have been heated by the earth itself for centuries. It was furnished for function, a table of dark wood that was heavier than it needed to be, chairs that fit Harry better than most furniture in his experience, a lamp that produced steady, even light without flickering. No windows. He did not mind the no windows. Windows were where the outside could observe you. The food arrived without announcement, a tray carried by a small goblin with a white streak in its hair who set it down and left immediately, which Harry appreciated. The plates were warm from whatever stone surface had held them. There was something savory in a thick sauce over some kind of roasted root and bread on the side, and a drink that smelled of black tea but tasted denser, more mineral, like tea that had also been a stone once. Harry ate all of it. Ragnar sat across the table with a ledger open in front of him and did not watch Harry eat. He was reading, annotating, treating the meal as a parallel activity rather than a focal point, and Harry noticed this and felt something ease in his shoulders that had not been easy since approximately the age of 4. He drank the last of the drink and set the cup down. Ragnar turned the ledger around and pushed it across the table without looking up. This is the Potter estate summary as of this morning, he said. I will read it to you. Ask questions when you don't understand something. There are no stupid questions in this context. This is complicated even for adults who have had years to prepare for it. He read. It took 40 minutes. The numbers at first meant nothing to Harry. They were 2 large, dimensionless numbers that had lost their connection to anything physical. But Ragnar was a patient translator, and he worked in units that Harry could work with. This many galleons is roughly equivalent to this many Muggle pounds. This property holding is this many houses in these locations, worth roughly this much in rental income per year. This investment portfolio is this much per quarter. Harry did the multiplication in his head and asked about the results, and Ragnar confirmed them and kept reading. When he reached the Black estate, the reading slowed. The Black holdings were older than the Potter ones, and the architecture of the wealth was different, less in liquid accounts, more in land and hereditary debt instruments, in complex arrangements with other old families that had the quality of geological formations rather than financial products, things that had been in place so long they had stopped being transactions and become terrain. This entry, Harry said, interrupting for the first time, pointing at a line item. Malfoy, there's a figure. The Malfoy Black Credit Arrangement of 1923, Ragnock said, the Malfoy family borrowed against the Black estate. The arrangement was supposed to be settled by 1940. It wasn't. Interest has been accruing. He looked at the figure. That is the current outstanding balance. Harry looked at the figure. So Malfoy owes me money. The Lord Black, yes, which is now you. What happens to that when a new Lord Black is verified? Acceleration clause, Ragnock said. Full balance due within 30 days. Harry picked up the quill from the tray beside the ledger. He wrote in the margin in his small, careful handwriting, 7 years of school in the Muggle system, always told to write small so he didn't use Dudley's supplies up too fast, acceleration notice. When? He looked up at Ragnock. Tomorrow, Ragnock said. Harry circled what he had written. He put the quill down. They continued. When Ragnock reached the Peveril section, the reading stopped entirely. The Peveril vault has been sealed since 1875, Ragnock said. The contents are unknown. The seal broke this morning when your blood completed the verification. Our corridor team is opening the physical door now. He looked at Harry. I can tell you what the Peveril succession binding says the vault should contain. I cannot tell you what is actually there. What does it say it should contain? Ragnock was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of someone choosing words. The quiet of someone deciding whether to say something that falls outside the normal scope of a financial briefing. Objects of significance, he said. The Peveril family is very old, older than Gringotts. The objects they retained across 12 centuries are commensurate with that age. He closed the ledger. You can see it yourself. I will take you down today if you wish. Yes, Harry said. The cart descended through the levels of Gringotts the way a thought descends through the layers of a dream, fast and vertiginous, with the walls changing around you to mark the passage through registers you hadn't known existed. The upper levels were gray stone, institutional, busy with the practical infrastructure of a bank. Below that, the stone darkened and the passages narrowed and the air changed, acquiring the particular quality of air that has not been near a window in centuries. Further still, and the stone shifted to the rust red that was not quite rust, a deeper oxidation, a mineral color that Harry's eyes kept wanting to read as something biological. Griffook drove. Ragnock sat beside Harry in the cart, watching the walls. Harry watched them too. The lamps down here were spaced further apart and the darkness between them was complete and confident. He was not afraid of the dark. He was aware, in the way he was aware of most things, that it was the kind of dark worth noting, purposeful, sealed in by something more than the absence of light. He put his hand on the cart rail and felt the vibration of the track, the deep mechanical heartbeat of an institution that ran its business all the way down. The Potter vault was first. The door was bronze like the entrance doors, 20 feet tall, with a locking mechanism that Griffook worked with practiced hands. Inside, towers of gold. Yes, Harry registered this, but what he noticed first was the smell. Old paper and the particular sharpness of enchanted metal. The ranked shelves with their shrunken trunks, each labeled in a handwriting he didn't know. A glass cabinet of documents with the Potter Griffin seal pressed into the wax at the top of each stack. Family portraits in miniature hung along the left wall, faces he did not know but whose cheekbones he recognized in his own reflection. He stood in the doorway and looked at it. Later, Ragnock said behind him, not unkind, accurate, they moved on. The black vault was 2 levels deeper. Its door was not bronze. It was iron, older. Its surface worked with designs that were not decorative in the way that decorations are decorative. They were structural, like load-bearing elements made visible. When the door swung open, the smell was different from the Potter vault, something older and wetter, like the inside of a very old forest on a very cold day. Harry stepped through the door and stopped. The magic hit him in the chest, not painfully, but with the specificity of recognition, the way a note played on one instrument causes a string to vibrate on another across the room. Something in this vault knew the thing in his blood. It pressed against his sternum from the inside, a thumb pressure that was not aggressive but was absolutely precise. He turned around and looked at Ragnock. It responds to the bloodline, Ragnock said. His voice was professionally steady. This is normal. It doesn't feel normal, Harry said. No, Ragnock said, but it is. They stood in the vault for another moment. The magic in Harry's chest did something that might be called recognition if recognition were a physical sensation, if it were something that happened in the body rather than in the mind. Harry let it happen. He did not move toward the vault's interior, which extended further back than the lamp's light reached. Later. All of this was for later. He had a month's worth of later ahead of him, and this was the first morning. He walked back out, the vault closed. The Peveril vault was at the end of everything. The cart track ended 200 meters before they reached it, and they walked the rest of the way on stone that predated the track. Stone that the goblins had cut their corridors into rather than through, navigating around what was already here rather than removing it. Harry noticed that Griffook walked differently in this section, not slower, not more careful, but with a quality of deliberateness that suggested awareness of being a guest in a space that had established its own terms. The door was obsidian, or it looked like obsidian, completely black, without seam or handle or visible lock, with a surface that took no light from the lamp and gave nothing back. In the lamplight, the vault face was simply an absence, a place where the wall had been replaced with void. Harry walked toward it, the door opened. The movement was not mechanical, there was no hinge, no pivot point, no swing. The darkness simply chose to allow him through, and did. Inside, the same warm, sourceless quality as the deeper corridor, but concentrated, pressurized. The lamp Griffook carried reached further here than it should have, illuminating a space that was smaller than either of the other vaults, but arranged differently, not storage, but presentation. A stone table at the center, and on the table 3 objects, each placed with a deliberateness that suggested whoever put them there had been thinking about what it would mean for someone else to find them. A wand, a stone. A bundle of silver-gray cloth. Harry looked at the cloth. It was moving. Slightly, barely, just at the edge of visible, a shifting in the folds that he was not going to attribute to air movement in a sealed vault. "Don't touch anything today," Ragnok said from the doorway. His voice was its usual ledger voice, clipped and precise, but he had stopped at the threshold. "I wasn't going to," Harry said. He stood a foot from the table and looked at the 3 objects. The wand was dark wood with a faint grain and was lighter visually than the others, less pressing, less immediate. The stone was rough and gray and unremarkable, except that looking directly at it required a specific decision, a sort of intentionality. The cloth moved. "Ragnok," Harry said. "Yes." The story of the 3 brothers. He had not heard it, but the basin in the diagnostic room had written the word Peveril in characters he couldn't read, and 3 objects were on a table, and the logic was not complicated. "I need to know it." "You will," Ragnok said, the same words as before in the diagnostic chamber. A commitment, not a deflection. Harry looked at the table for 10 more seconds. He turned and walked to the door, and the door closed behind him as he stepped through. It made no sound, which was the most unnerving thing about it. A door that size, that solid, should have sound. Its silence was a choice. He followed the lamp back up the corridor. The stone pressed warmly from both sides. Below him, distantly, he could hear the vault corridors settling, the particular sound of old enclosed spaces adjusting to the presence of something they had been waiting to hold. The room they gave him was 2 levels up from the deep vaults, in a section of the building that existed specifically for the institutional accommodation of unusual situations. It was not designed for comfort in the way a hotel is designed for comfort, which Harry had never experienced anyway. It was designed for durability, for the long stay, for the specific needs of someone who needed to be present in this building for an extended period and did not want to be observed. Stone walls. A desk of the same heavy dark wood as the parlor table, 2 lamps, a wardrobe currently empty. A bed with blankets of a dense, practical wool that held warmth the way stone holds warmth, slowly acquired and slow to give up. A window. Not a real window, a ventilation aperture that opened onto an internal shaft, carrying cool underground air in a steady, quiet current. Through it, he could hear the distant machinery of the levels below, the vaults working their perpetual arithmetic. The sound was not alarming, it was consistent, a lock on the door on the inside. Harry turned the lock, he heard it engage with a solid, definitive click that was the sound of a mechanism designed to hold. He sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the room. No television, no Dudley's voice through the drywall, cataloging what he'd done at school, what he wanted for dinner, why Harry's presence at the table was an offense. No creak of stairs that might be Vernon deciding that the day's events required a supplementary discussion. No drip of water in the kitchen and no smell of cigarette smoke from the garden, and no particular quality of silence that was silence being stretched tight over something coiled underneath. Just stone and cool air and the machinery below, which was not malevolent machinery, which was only the sound of work being done on his behalf by parties with a contractual obligation to do it correctly. He put his hand on the wall. The stone was warm with the warmth of deep earth, with the warmth of age rather than heat source, and it felt not safe. He did not have a calibrated sense of safe. It felt honest, like something that was what it appeared to be and was not trying to be anything else. He lay down on the bed without taking the windbreaker off. In Surrey, 40 minutes northwest by train, a monitoring charm that Albus Dumbledore had placed on the Privet Drive wards in 1982 registered an absence where it had expected a presence and began the series of escalating alerts that such charms were designed to produce. First ping, second ping. The third would not go to a charm, it would go directly to him, to the silver instrument on the desk in his tower office, the one shaped like a small spinning top that measured the proximity of certain wards to a certain child. In that office, in a tower above a Scottish loch, in a room that smelled of lemon drops and old scholarship and the accumulated authority of decades, the instrument spun twice on its brass base and then stopped. Albus Dumbledore was in the middle of a letter. He stopped writing. He looked at the instrument. He set his quill down. He did not reach for his lemon drops, which was, in the private language of his own habits, significant. He reached instead for a second instrument, this one shaped like a spoked wheel, that measured the activity of the Potter and Black Vault wards in Gringotts. The wheel was supposed to be still. It was very much not still. It was rotating at the speed of a ward break in progress, which was a speed Dumbledore had not seen it move at in 40 years. He sat with this for a moment. He thought through the steps, the compact, the contingency. Things that once begun had their own momentum. He picked up his quill again. He wrote 3 words on a fresh sheet of parchment, "The boy's gone," and then looked at those 3 words for long enough that the ink dried and then crossed them out, because writing was thinking, and thinking at this particular juncture required a great deal more than 3 words in the particular trap of that phrasing. He started again. Below him, below the lake, below the level of the instruments and the crossed-out words, Harry Potter lay in a room with a locked door and listened to the sound of the deep levels working, and his eyes were open, and he was not going anywhere, and the stone was warm. He was not sleeping, not yet. He was doing something that would take years to identify as what it actually was, being still in a space that was, for the first time, organized around the protection of him rather than the management of him, noticing the difference. Holding very quiet until he was sure the difference was real. The ventilation shaft moved its cool air through the room. The machinery turned. The vault corridors 3 levels below made the sound of extremely old things accommodating new weight. The lock on the door was locked. Harry closed his eyes. Chapter 2, The Education of a Lord. The first lesson began at 6 in the morning, in a repurposed document storage room on the second sublevel that smelled of old paper and copper sulfate from the preservation treatments on the archived files. 2 chairs, 1 table, a lamp positioned for reading rather than atmosphere. The books were already on the table when Harry arrived, their spines in 4 languages he could not yet read, stacked with the particular precision of someone who considered disorder a form of dishonesty. The goblin waiting for him was ancient in the specific way that made age seem like an achievement rather than an accumulation. Its face had the quality of something repeatedly revised over time, until only the essential geometry remained. It said, "I am called Phileas. I will teach you the law, the money, and the names." "We begin with the law." Harry sat down and opened the first book. It was the Magical Inheritance Act of 1648, annotated by 12 generations of Gringotts clerks in margins so dense the original text had become something like a spine running through a body of commentary. The annotations were in 3 scripts and at least 2 languages. Harry read the English ones first, then worked backward through the Latin ones using the vocabulary list Phileas produced without being asked, setting it on the table beside the book and returning immediately to his own reading as though providing resources was a mechanical process requiring no acknowledgement. Harry read for 43 minutes before speaking. Phileas had placed his own book open in front of him at the start and had read for the full 43 minutes without looking up. He did not appear to be waiting. He appeared to have forgotten Harry was in the room, which Harry suspected was intentional and was its own form of teaching. Page 41, Harry said, "The contested transfer clause. If a ward is placed with non-magical guardians without bloodline verification, the placement is void." "Voidable," Phileas said without looking up. "There is a distinction. Void means it never existed. Voidable means it existed but can be undone." The 1648 Act creates a voidable placement. Gringotts filed the voiding action on October 14th. What's the difference in practice? A void placement means Dumbledore had no authority at any point. A voidable placement means he had authority until it was challenged. Phileas turned a page. He will argue for voidable. His legal team will argue that he acted under legitimate emergency provisions, that his authority was real until the moment it was challenged, and that anything he did under that authority was therefore legitimate. "And we argue void," Phileas confirmed. The emergency provisions he cited require prior notification to the institution holding the heir's financial interests. He did not notify Gringotts. Under Clause 12 of the Act, failure to notify within 30 days renders the emergency provision inapplicable. He looked up for the first time. If you read Clause 12, Harry found Clause 12, read it again. He was 38 days late on the notification. 39, Phileas said. The filing date versus the provision activation date, one of our clerks recounted it twice. He went back to his book. The placement is void, not voidable. This is not a close argument. Harry put his finger on Clause 12 and thought about what it meant for a man to have known the clause existed, known the 30-day window, and filed on day 39. Either through error or through the calculation that no one with authority to challenge him would ever be in a position to do so. He thought about which of those two options was more likely. He went back to reading. By the fourth day, he had established a routine, which was something his body required and his mind had learned to construct wherever he was placed. Lessons with Phileas from 6 until 9. Breakfast in the green parlor, usually alone, sometimes with Ragnarok if Ragnarok's morning schedule permitted, which was more often than Harry would have predicted for the senior director of a major financial institution. Review of the previous day's legal material from 9:30 until noon. Lunch. Afternoon spent in the archive, working through the family documents Griffook retrieved from the Potter vault in organized batches. Correspondence, property records, research notes in his mother's small precise handwriting that he read slowly and twice, and set aside in a growing stack that he thought of, without naming it, as the important pile. His magic was doing something. It had always done things. The Dursleys had spent 7 years treating it as a malfunction, a manufacturing defect in an otherwise manageable product, and Harry had absorbed enough of that framing to think of it the same way, as a force that escaped when his control slipped, as evidence of something wrong rather than something present. In the deep levels of Gringotts, it was behaving differently, not louder, not more dramatic, more organized. On the second morning, he walked past a locked archive door and the lock disengaged. He stopped, looked at it, pushed the door open an inch to confirm, then closed it and re-engaged the lock manually with the handle. He walked on. On the third day, the lamp in his room adjusted its light when he was reading without him touching it, brightening when his eyes moved closer to the page, which was useful and which he decided to simply accept. On the fourth day, he was in the middle of the succession and titles act, and something in his chest did a specific thing, a lateral movement like a caught gear finally engaging, and the words on the page clarified in a way that had nothing to do with his vision. He mentioned it to Phileas on the morning of the fifth day. Phileas said, the suppression enchantments were removed on day 2. Our curse-breaking team worked through the night, 4 layers, oldest at the base, most recent at the surface. The most recent was placed November 1981, the oldest dates to your birth. He turned a page. Your core has been operating at approximately 14% of its natural capacity for your entire life. It is recalibrating. Harry sat with this 14%. Approximately, our diagnostics are not precise at that level, and now. Now it is recalibrating, Phileas repeated. Give it time, don't push it, it will find its own level. Harry looked at the page he'd been reading, at the words that were sharper than they'd been on any previous day. He thought about 7 years of accidental magic, light bulbs shattering, food burning on Petunia's stove in the instant before she made him eat it, his hair regrowing overnight after she shaved it with a kitchen knife. 14%. What the thing in his chest had been doing at 14% was remarkable, which meant that the thing it was becoming at a higher percentage was something he was going to have to think about carefully and not alarm anyone with. He went back to reading. He would deal with it as it arrived. Ragnarok brought the second ledger on the 7th day after dinner, carrying it under his arm with the practiced ease of someone who carries ledgers the way other people carry umbrellas, not out of immediate need, but as a matter of professional identity. I want to show you something, he said. This was unusual. Ragnarok told Harry things. He reported, he informed, he answered questions with the completeness of someone who considered half-answers a form of fraud. He had not before this used the phrasing I want, which was different. It had volition in it, specificity, the implication that this was not purely the contingency protocol talking. He opened the ledger to the section tabbed in red. The Black Estate's outstanding debt instruments, he said. All active obligations held by third parties against the estate. Harry pulled the ledger toward him, 14 entries. He read them with the systematic attention he had been practicing for a week, the way Phileas had shown him to read legal documents, first for structure, then for amounts, then for the specific language of the obligation terms. Most were old family mortgages, aristocratic credit arrangements from the 1930s and 1940s, several with names he was accumulating toward recognition. 3 entries were more recent. He read all 3 and then looked at the third one again. Dumbledore drew from the Potter estate, Harry said. A line of credit against the Potter Trust, Ragnock said. Authorized in January 1982 under the Wartime Wizarding Finance Act, Emergency Provision 7, which permitted appointed guardians to draw operational funds from their ward's trusts for the benefit and protection of the ward. He let this land. The funds were dispersed to 4 accounts. The largest recipient is listed as the Order of the Phoenix Operational Fund. The others are individual names. Harry looked at the figure. He was getting better at large numbers, at holding them in proportion against the rest of the ledger, but this one required a moment. He funded his organization with my parents' money. He funded his organization with money that was legally under his administrative authority, Ragnock said, which was the same thing stated with maximum precision. That authority terminated on October 14th. The outstanding balance became a personal debt on the same day. Harry put his finger on the figure. He was aware that there was something happening in his chest that was not the magic recalibrating, that was something older and more human and more difficult, and he noted it and kept his face even. Does he know yet? Harry said. His bank at the Trust Administration Office will have flagged the authority termination. The formal debt notice goes out tomorrow morning. Ragnock's tone was the tone of confirmed logistics. He has been doing the arithmetic since October 14th. He is intelligent enough to understand what the vault seal breaks mean, so he knows. He knows the shape of it, the specific figure tomorrow. Harry sat back. He thought about Albus Dumbledore in a tower that smelled of whatever towers smelled of old books. He guessed candles, the particular institutional gravity of being the most powerful wizard in Britain, doing arithmetic on a sum that had been, until 8 days ago, his to use. He thought about what it meant to fund a war with a dead woman's money and tell yourself it was for the protection of her child. He thought you should have to pay for that, not in the register of anger, which was not how he processed things that mattered in the register of accounting. Every debt had a creditor. He was the creditor. The mechanism was already in motion. Good, he said, and picked up the ledger again. The news of the Wisengamot session arrived on the 9th morning in the form of a formal notification delivered to Ragnock's office by a ministry owl that had apparently been circling Gringotts for 40 minutes before a door guard let it in with the specific reluctance of professionals who consider owls a form of drama. Ragnock brought the notification to Harry at breakfast. Emergency session, October 28th, Harry read, called by 6 senior Wisengamot members citing procedural concerns regarding simultaneous tri-house seat activations in an unrepresented minor. He turned it over. The back was blank. He turned it face up again. Who are the 6? Ragnock named them. 2 from Dumbledore's direct faction. 3 from the traditionalist bloc, which was the parliamentary wing of old family interests, people who had been sitting on their family's accumulated authority for decades and treated the Wisengamot less as a legislature and more as a property boundary. 1 was independent, an older witch named Marchbanks, whose motivation, Ragnock assessed, was probably genuine procedural concern rather than factional calculation. Marchbanks is not the enemy, Harry said. No, the 3 traditionalists, they'll follow whoever they think is winning. Within limits set by their own interests, yes. And Malfoy, he's traditionalist, but he's not in the 6. Malfoy, Ragnock said, received the acceleration notice yesterday. He has 30 days to pay. He is currently recalculating his factional loyalties against his financial exposure. He set his own tea down. He will not move against you in the Wisengamot. The cost is too direct. Harry nodded. He set the notification beside his plate and ate the rest of his breakfast methodically while working through the implications, and when he finished, he said, I want to be there. Ragnock said, you are 7 years old. I know. Does the Magical Procedures Act allow claimants to attend recognition proceedings? Section 14, yes. As the claimant in an active recognition proceeding, you have the right to attend and to be heard. Has it been exercised before at my age? Not in documented history. Harry picked up the notification and folded it precisely along its original lines. Then there's no established procedure for telling me I can't. I'll need to read the Wisengamot procedural rules before the 28th. Ragnock looked at him for a moment. The carved mahogany face performed no particular expression. I will have Phileas extend the curriculum. Thank you, Harry said and went to the lesson room. He spent the afternoon of the 10th day in the Potter Vault. This was his first extended solo visit, authorized after what had been, on Gringotts' part, a deliberate pause that communicated something between professional assessment and professional respect. The cart took him down alone, which he had not done before, and the experience of the deep corridor without another person's lamp was different, not frightening, but more truthful somehow, the dark having its own character without a companion's light softening it. Inside the vault, he started with the correspondence files. His parents had kept letters, not romantic correspondence, though there was some of that in a separate locked box he set aside, operational letters, research notes exchanged, the working documents of two people engaged in something serious. His mother's letters were in her small, precise scientist's handwriting, dense with theory and cross-referenced with dates. His father's were longer, less organized, the handwriting of someone whose thoughts moved faster than his pen and had never quite resolved this tension. He found 3 letters from Dumbledore. The first was dated 1978, congratulating his parents on their contribution to Order efforts, warmly phrased, signed with the full name and the string of titles. The second was dated 1980, advising his parents to consider going into hiding, citing Voldemort's escalating intelligence gathering. The phrasing here was different, still warm, still grandfatherly, but with something underneath it that Harry's week of reading legal documents had given him a framework to identify. It was the warmth of someone managing a resource. You are important to our efforts. Your safety is critical to the work. The work requires you to trust my judgment on the location and terms of the hiding. All of those things were in the letter. None of them were stated plainly. They were distributed through the concern, through the affection, the way iron is distributed through stone, structural and invisible. The third letter was dated October 29, 1981, 3 weeks after Godric's Hollow. He read the third letter carefully. Then he folded it, put it in his inside jacket pocket, and closed the correspondence file. He spent the next hour going through the family documents cabinet, methodically, pulling each folder and reading the contents and replacing them in order. And he found the folder labeled Contingency, Private BF, which turned out to contain a letter from his parents' Gringotts account manager explaining in careful, agitated language what he had discovered about the guardianship filing and what he intended to do about it, and why he was putting this documentation in the vault rather than the institutional record. Harry read it twice. Boniface Flintlock, account manager, Potter Trust, November 14, 1982. Dismissed February 1983, per a notation in Ragnarok's summary ledger. Harry had read that notation and filed it. Now he read the letter that explained it. He sat in the vault for a while after, on the stone floor with his back against the cold wall and the folder in his lap, and thought about a goblin who had done his job in the face of a man like Dumbledore and lost the job for it, and put the evidence somewhere that could only be found by the person it was meant to protect. He thought, I know your name, Boniface Flintlock, that's going in the ledger, not sentimentally, practically, names mattered. The debt ran in both directions. He put the folder back precisely where he'd found it. Lucius Malfoy arrived on the 12th day. Harry knew about it 40 minutes in advance, which was enough time to finish the chapter he was reading on Wisengamot voting procedures and replace it with the Malfoy Black credit instrument documents so the relevant figures were current in his working memory. Ragnarok's assistant knocked on the study room door and delivered the information in the same flat tone used for all information, which Harry appreciated. The absence of emphasis left him to calibrate the importance himself. Is Ragnarok handling it? Harry said. The senior director requests your presence in the observing gallery. The observing gallery was an alcove in the upper archive level, behind a low stone parapet, looking down into the main meeting corridor 20 feet below. It was not a comfortable space. The ledge was stone and there was nowhere to lean except the wall, but it was designed for exactly this function, and the acoustics of the corridor below had been arranged, whether by architecture or enchantment, to carry clearly upward. Harry settled on the ledge and looked down. Lucius Malfoy entered the meeting corridor from the main hall with the ease of a man who has never in his life entered a room he was not certain would receive him. The robes were deep charcoal with silver detailing at the collar, expensive without being gaudy, the spending of someone who considers ostentation a form of insecurity and prefers the authority of restraint. The hair was extraordinary, white blonde, perfectly dressed, no strand with any purpose except to be exactly where it was. He carried a cane with a silver serpent head, and the cane was not for walking. Behind him, 2 solicitors in matching dark robes with matching briefcases, the professional infantry of the legally aggressive. Ragnarok was already seated at the meeting table when they were shown in. He was reading a document that was clearly not about Malfoy. He continued reading it for 7 seconds after Malfoy's entrance. Harry counted. 7 seconds is a meaningful interval when one person is accustomed to being the axis around which rooms organize. Malfoy sat. He did it smoothly, correctly, without letting the 7 seconds register in his posture. He was too practiced to show irritation at something so small. But Harry, watching from above, saw the cane pressed slightly harder against the floor than it needed to be. "Director Ragnarok," Malfoy said. His voice was a studied instrument, resonant, measured, carrying the specific timbre of a man who has spoken in the Wisengamot for 15 years and knows what authority sounds like because he has been performing it since adolescence. "I appreciate you making time, Mr. Malfoy," Ragnarok said, setting down his document. The Malfoy Black Credit Arrangement, 1923, no preamble, no reciprocal pleasantry. Malfoy's solicitor began to pull documents from the briefcase. Ragnarok already had the acceleration notice on the table, facing Malfoy, slid across the wood in one clean movement that covered the distance without drama. Malfoy looked at it. He did not touch it. He looked at the figure in the lower third of the page with the specific, careful attention of someone who already knew the figure and was using this moment to decide how to respond to it rather than to process it. "The acceleration clause," Malfoy said, "is subject to the usual grounds of challenge. The lordship verification timeline is closed," Ragnarok said. "Bloodline verification under the Founding Compact is not subject to Wisengamot challenge timelines. The verification completed October 14th. The acceleration clause activated on that date. The 30-day clock is running." He touched the document. "Mr. Malfoy. The balance, the interest accrual methodology, and the payment schedule are all in the notice. If your legal team has specific questions regarding the calculation, they can file a formal query with our accounts department. The query period is 15 days, which falls within the 30-day window." The second solicitor was writing something. The first was maintaining his expression with the professional diligence of a man paid to maintain expressions. "The heir," Malfoy said. The word was even, calibrated, positioned to be merely informational. "Lord Potterblack Peveril. He is 7 years old." "Yes," Ragnarok said. He waited. "An interesting situation," Malfoy said. "A child of 7 holding ancient titles and managing substantial estates. One wonders about the suitability of the arrangement, whether proper guardianship provisions have been considered." It was well done, Harry thought. The implications were all present without being actionable: concern for the child's welfare, doubt about the institutional arrangement, the opening of a door through which a guardianship motion could walk if invited. It was the move of someone who had decided that if he could not fight the debt directly, he could question the authority of the creditor. Ragnarok let the silence sit for 4 seconds. "The guardianship is governed by the Founding Compact," he said, "which was in place before the Wisengamot and is not subject to Wisengamot guardianship provisions. Gringotts' provisional custody of a verified heir is, specifically and intentionally, not a matter of Wisengamot discretion." He straightened the acceleration notice with 2 fingers. "The 30 days, Mr. Malfoy." Malfoy stood. He did it smoothly, as he had done everything. He reached into his jacket and produced a small card, which he set on the table. "My solicitors will file the formal query. They have 15 days, Ragnarok said. Malfoy turned toward the door. He paused exactly once in mid-turn, the controlled pause of a man stopping to examine a thought rather than the involuntary pause of someone caught off guard. He looked up toward the gallery level, not at any specific point, at the general elevation, at the stone above the meeting corridor, with the brief, precise attention of someone who has heard something in a room they thought had only one other occupant. The gallery was unlit. Harry sat on the stone ledge and held absolutely still and watched Lucius Malfoy look at the shadow he occupied. Malfoy looked away. He left. Harry waited until the sound of the footsteps had gone before he moved. That evening, at the table in the green parlor with the empty plates between them, Harry asked, "Will he pay?" "He will query the calculation," Ragnarok said. "The query will find the calculation correct. He will then determine whether he has the liquid assets to pay within the remaining window or whether he needs to negotiate a structured settlement. Can he negotiate? Once the query period closes, he can request a settlement discussion. We will grant it. The terms will be less favorable than immediate payment, which is standard." Ragnarok turned a page in his evening report. "He will pay. He has no legal basis for refusal that survives contact with the compact, and he knows it." He looked up at the gallery. Yes, he knew someone was there. He suspected. Ragnarok looked up. He will have someone research the gallery alcove's existence now. He will find that it is a documented feature of the meeting corridor, that it is accessible from the archive level, and that it is routinely used by senior management for observation of significant meetings. So he'll know I was there, he'll know someone was there, he will assume it was you. Harry thought about this. Good, he said. I want him to know. Ragnock regarded him. You want him to understand that you are paying attention. I want him to understand that he is being assessed, Harry said. There's a difference. Attention is passive. Assessment is active. He picked up his quill and opened the ledger copy he'd brought to dinner, which was a habit Ragnock had not commented on. He's going to be in the Weisengamot chamber on the 28th. I need to know how he'll vote before he knows how he'll vote. And I think he'll vote for me, Harry said. Not because he likes me, because the alternative is voting against the person who holds his debt and who will be managing that debt for the next decade at minimum. He found the page he wanted. Frightened people vote practically. Ragnock's face did the thing it occasionally did, the small pre-decision movement, the completion of an internal revision. He looked at the 7-year-old across the table who was eating his dinner while reading accelerated debt clause methodology and said nothing. He went back to his report. Dumbledore came on the 21st day. He arrived at 9 in the morning without notice. This was intelligence. It removed the preparation time, arrived before the day's first session was complete, presented itself as pastoral and spontaneous rather than strategic. Harry received the news from Ragnock's assistant 6 minutes after Dumbledore entered the building, which meant the door guards had flagged him immediately. 6 minutes was enough time to finish the paragraph he was reading, replace it with his current policy notes, straighten his jacket, and walk to the anteroom off the main entrance. The jacket was gray wool, charcoal, fitted correctly. Ragnock had dispatched a runner to Madame Malkin's Diagon Alley branch on the 3rd day with Harry's measurements and specific instructions, because a lord and a windbreaker was an argument the other side could use, and that particular argument was now closed. Harry had not asked for the jacket. He had received it and put it on and understood what it was for and worn it every day since. Ragnock met him in the anteroom first. 3 objectives, Ragnock said, keeping his voice at the register of someone in the middle of a normal professional morning. He wants to see your physical condition. He wants to establish that he has access to you. He wants to position himself as an ally rather than an adversary so that anything he does subsequently reads as protective rather than controlling. I know, Harry said, don't argue with him. If you argue, you are accepting that he has standing to be argued with. I know, Harry said. He went in. Dumbledore had positioned himself in the center of the room, which was the optimal move, standing, commanding the space, able to offer his hand from a position of open welcome. The purple and silver robes were immaculate. The half-moon spectacles caught the morning light. Fawkes sat on his left shoulder with the self-possessed calm of a creature that has never needed to prove anything to anyone, his plumage the particular red gold of something that has been burning and finds this perfectly natural. Dumbledore was, Harry absorbed this immediately and without rancor, genuinely extraordinary, not performed grandeur. Actual grandeur, the kind that accrues to someone who has been, for a very long time, the most important person in every room they enter. The warmth was real too, in its way. It was real warmth applied in service of real strategy, which did not make it false, it made it efficient. Harry, the name carrying everything. Knowledge, history, a relationship that existed in Dumbledore's construction of the world, even if it had never existed anywhere else. Professor Dumbledore, Harry said. Dumbledore's eyes moved across him, quick, trained, cataloging, the jacket, the posture. The absence of the split lip, which had healed in the first 3 days, the absence of the purple eye. The presence of something in Harry's face that was not what he had been expecting, some quality of organization that belonged, in his experience, to people 15 years older. I am so relieved to see you are safe, Dumbledore said. He took 2 steps forward, closing the distance to the conversational. When I discovered you had left the Dursleys, I have a meeting with my account manager shortly, Harry said. His voice was even, not cold. Cold would have been its own argument, even factual. The voice of someone whose schedule is full and who is being precise rather than rude. If you would like to arrange a formal meeting, Gringotts' administrative office can help with scheduling. Dumbledore paused. One clean pause, contained and controlled. He was too good to let it show as anything except a thoughtful intake before continuing. Harry, he said, I am not here on official business. I am here because I am concerned about you. You are very important to me personally and to our world. a slight gesture, almost unconscious, toward the door through which Ragnar had just entered. "I want to ensure that the people advising you have your genuine interests at heart." Harry looked at Ragnar, who was standing at the door with his hands behind his back, and then looked back at Dumbledore. "Mr. Ragnar is bound by the founding compact to act in the interest of the verified heir," Harry said. "There are financial penalties for breach, plus reputation consequences in the international banking community, plus legal consequences under the 1648 Act." He kept his voice curious, not combative. "Are there equivalent penalties for you, Professor, if you fail to act in my interest?" The silence was brief and complete. "Harry, I would never—" "That's not what I asked," Harry said. The room held the question. Fawkes made a sound, one soft, descending note, not musical exactly, but adjacent to music, the sound of a very old creature observing something that matters. Then silence. Dumbledore looked at Harry Potter across the 7 feet of stone floor between them. He was, behind the spectacles, doing something that involved a significant revision of his current operating model, and he was doing it fast, which was one of the things that had made him extraordinary across 7 decades of operating in high-stakes environments. He saw a child who had been in this building for 21 days and had in that time read the Magical Inheritance Act, the Succession and Titles Act, the Founding Compact, the Wisengamot Procedural Rules, and the Magical Procedures Act, and had processed them not as an overwhelmed minor processing foreign concepts, but as a practitioner building an argument. He saw a child who had asked, with perfect procedural courtesy, for him to schedule through proper channels, and who had done this not as deflection but as strategy, because every time Dumbledore went through proper channels, he created a paper trail, and every paper trail was a document, and documents could be subpoenaed, cited, filed, and turned back on their author. He saw a child who had been in a cupboard for 7 years and was not, in any way that Dumbledore needed to factor into his planning, behaving like someone who had been in a cupboard for 7 years. "I see," Dumbledore said quietly, a phrase that was the honest minimum. "The administrative team's contact details are on the public information sheet at the main entrance," Harry said. "Thank you for coming in." He turned and walked out. He did not look back. In the corridor, 20 feet from the anteroom door, he stopped. He put his hand on the wall. The stone was warm. He held it there for 3 seconds, feeling the warmth, the deep earth consistency of it, the honest simplicity of a wall that was only and exactly a wall. His hands were still. He had expected something on the other side of that room. Some version of the aftermath that his body would need to process. The man had been warm and vast and genuinely powerful, and had looked at Harry with something he could not fully categorize, something that lived in the neighborhood of care and was not, entirely, its opposite. And Harry had sent him to the administrative team. He felt the absence of aftermath. He felt the same flat, organized quiet that had been his since the locked door on the first night. He took his hand off the wall and went back to the study room. Behind him, in the anteroom, Dumbledore stood for a moment longer than he needed to. He set the bag of lemon drops on the side table beside the door. He looked at nothing in particular for 6 seconds. Then he straightened his robes and left. Ragnar, entering the anteroom 30 seconds later, looked at the bag of lemon drops with the expression of someone examining a display case at a museum, interested, unmoved. He picked it up. He crossed to the waste bin in the corner. He dropped it in. He went back to his office. On the evening before the Wisengamot session, the 27th day, Ragnar knocked on Harry's door. Harry unlocked it. The knock had 2 qualities: 1 rap, pause, 2nd rap, that was becoming recognizable, which was something Harry had noticed and not mentioned because mentioning it would have made it something, and at the moment it was more useful as something unspoken. Ragnar entered and stood in the room without sitting, visit specific and brief, which meant information of defined scope. 2 things, he said. "Go on," Harry said. "The first, the legal argument for tomorrow is sound. The Peveril seat gap is the anchor. The compact's primacy over Wisengamot procedure is the wall. Dumbledore cannot block the activations without also destroying the legal framework that protects every other hereditary title in the country, including his own allies' seats. He knows this. He will not try to block, he will negotiate. For what? Influence. He wants to remain relevant to you. He will offer information, support, history, things only he knows. He will offer them as gifts and they will function as debts." Ragnar looked at him steadily. "Listen to what he offers, do not commit." "I know," Harry said. "I know you know, I'm telling you anyway." Harry almost said something he didn't. "The second thing," Ragnar said, "Arabella Fig. She is a squib who lived on your street. She filed a statement with our legal team today, pursuant to the Heritage Committee claim documentation." "I know who she is," Harry said. She smelled of cats. She observed signs of neglect and physical mistreatment over 7 years of intermittent surveillance. She did not report these observations to any authority during that period. He let this settle. She was instructed not to by Dumbledore. She has stated this in the filing. The room was quiet. She did what she was told, Harry said, not an absolution, an accounting entry. Yes. Add it to the Wisengamot file. It is already there, Ragnarok said. He moved to the door, stopped, the carved face in the lamplight. Tomorrow, you are going into a room where the majority will believe in good faith or bad that your presence is an anomaly. They will believe a 7-year-old in that chamber is a problem the system should correct. I know, you don't need to prove you belong there, the law has proven it. The room doesn't know that yet. He looked at Harry directly. Don't perform, don't be clever. Let the law speak, you speak only what is necessary. Silence in that room earns more than argument. Harry thought about the anteroom, about not arguing. All right, he said. Ragnarok nodded. He turned to leave. Ragnarok, Harry said. The director stopped. Why are you telling me this? Harry said. The compact obligation is satisfied. You've done everything required. Ragnarok's hand was on the door frame. The lamp made his shadow on the wall the size of something much larger than he was. The account will remain open, he said. Regardless, he left. Harry sat in the room with that. The ventilation shaft moved its cool air through. Below, the vaults turned in their deep corridors, settling and keeping their accounts. He could feel in the stone beneath him the faint vibration of the machinery, the perpetual motion of an institution that did not stop because the day ended, that kept running its figures through the night, patient and accurate and completely indifferent to what anyone upstairs thought about it. He picked up the Wisengamot procedural rules and read them until the lamp burned low, and then he set them down and lay back and looked at the stone ceiling in the dark. He was not afraid of tomorrow. He pressed at this carefully, wanting to be accurate, something adjacent to ready. Ready was not the right word because it implied a state of completion, and he was not complete. Was very far from complete, was 7 years old with a recalibrating magical core, and 3 weeks of accelerated legal education, and a locked door between himself and a world that had spent the last 7 years distributing him where it found him most useful. But he had the law. The law was precise and irreversible and did not care about warm voices or silver beards or the strategic deployment of lemon drops. He closed his eyes. The stone was warm. Chapter 3. The Reckoning. The Wisengamot chamber was underground. Harry had not known this until the morning of the session, when the Gringotts runner who had been assigned as his escort led him not toward the Ministry's public entrance on the Strand but down, through a passage that connected Gringotts sublevels to a junction corridor beneath the city, one of the old routes that predated the Ministry building above it. The chamber had been here before the Ministry. The Ministry had been built around it, above it, the way cities are built around rivers, acknowledging the prior claim by incorporating it, never quite admitting the dependency. The corridor to the chamber smelled of chalk and cold water and something Harry identified, after a moment, as accumulated argument. 500 years of contested positions pressed into the limestone the way moisture presses into old wood. He arrived at 7:20. The session began at 9. He had asked the night before to arrive early. The chamber was empty when he entered. The runner waited at the door, not inside at the door, and Harry walked down the center aisle alone. The tiers rose on both sides, carved into the rock, each seat on its stone plinth with the family crest cut into the back, generations of occupants having worn the armrests to a particular polish that no craftsman could have planned. The light came from a ring of lamps at ceiling height and from something in the walls themselves, a faint bioluminescence in the rock, the same non-color as the Gringotts' diagnostic basin. The Potter seat was in the third tier, left side. Dark wood, straight back armrests worn smooth by potters going back to the chamber's construction. He sat in it. Nothing happened. He was aware of this as information rather than disappointment. The Potter seat was old and significant, but it was not reactive, not in the way the Black Vault had been reactive. He stood. He crossed to the black seat, 2 tiers higher, 3 positions left. The black seat was carved from something that was not quite the same stone as the chamber walls, a denser, darker material that had been brought here rather than cut from here, imported at considerable effort for reasons the original Black Lord had presumably considered self-evident. The armrests were different from the Potter seat. Instead of smooth polish, there was a carved pattern worn almost flat by centuries of the same grip, a repeating motif that Harry traced with his fingers without quite seeing it clearly. He sat down, the chamber oriented. It was not dramatic. It was the thing he had felt in the Black Vault, the lateral movement, the engagement of something that had been waiting for the right configuration, but distributed through the room rather than concentrated in a space. The ambient magic of the chamber, the institutional presence of 500 years of accumulated governance shifted its attention, not toward him exactly, around him, He was suddenly a point of reference. He stood and walked to the Peveril seat. It was at the center of the outer ring, the highest tier of the gallery, and it was the oldest thing in the room by a margin that made everything else look recent. The stone it was carved from was not the chamber's limestone and not the black seat's imported rock. It was something older than both, something pre-geological in its quality, as though it had been here before the rock around it had decided what to be. There were no crest markings on the back, no wear on the armrests. The Peveril seat had been waiting for 112 years without being used, and it had not in that time acquired the quality of abandonment. It had acquired the quality of patience. Harry sat in it. The chamber did not orient. It resolved. Everything that had been a gradual shift when he sat in the black seat completed itself decisively, a mechanism clicking into its final position. The lamps at ceiling height brightened by a fraction. The bioluminescence in the walls deepened. His name, he understood without knowing how he understood it, had just been written into the room's understanding of itself in a way that would persist after today regardless of what happened in the next 2 hours. He sat in the Peveril seat and let the room know him. He stayed for 9 minutes. Then he moved back to the Potter seat because that was where the procedural rules placed him for the session, and because the Peveril seat had done what it needed to do and did not require him to remain in it to maintain the fact of his presence in it. He opened his ledger copy. He read, "They arrived in groups, which he had expected. Dumbledore's faction first, 6 witches and wizards who moved through the chamber with the coordinated ease of people who had been entering this room together for years. They found their seats with the automatic confidence of institutional memory and arranged themselves without discussion. 2 of them looked at Harry directly and then away, the practiced double-take of people managing surprise. The others did not look at all, which was a different management strategy. The traditionalist block arrived over the next 20 minutes in clusters of 2 and 3, the social geography of their arrival telling him something about their internal relationships, who consulted whom in quarters before sessions, who could not afford to be seen arriving together, who had already made their calculation and whose was still in progress. The Not Patriarch arrived with the Parkinson Patriarch and did not sit near him, which was interesting. The Gringotts representative sat 3 seats from where Harry would have expected from the factional map Ragnarok had drawn for him, which meant something had shifted in the past week. Marchbanks arrived alone, walked directly to her seat without looking at anyone, and opened a folder of documents. She was 80 years old and had the economy of movement of someone who had spent decades deciding which actions mattered. She did not look at Harry, she looked at her documents. This was, Harry assessed, genuine rather than performed. Lucius Malfoy arrived 8 minutes before the session. He crossed the chamber floor at a pace that covered distance without appearing to hurry, found his seat, settled into it with the controlled ease of his meeting corridor performance, and looked across the chamber at Harry. Harry did not look back, he was reading. After 4 seconds of this, Malfoy arranged his own documents. Harry registered this in his peripheral vision as the movement of someone recalibrating, and kept reading. Dumbledore entered from the senior gallery entrance with 2 minutes remaining. Midnight blue, lemon drops, fox. He moved through the chamber with the ease of a man for whom this room was a second home that had, over the decades, revised its floor plan around him. He reached the Chief Warlock's chair at the chamber's focal point, spread his papers, settled his spectacles, and looked across the room. At Harry. Harry looked up from the ledger at exactly the right moment to make the eye contact direct rather than accidental. He held it for 2 seconds, then he went back to reading. Dumbledore sat down. The first 40 minutes were the procedural establishment of record, and Harry let them run. The session clerk read the Gringotts' filings into the record, each one acknowledged, each one accepted by the chair without argument, building the foundation that everything subsequent would stand on. Harry had expected Dumbledore to challenge at least one of the filings on procedural grounds, a delaying tactic that would be ultimately unsuccessful but would demonstrate to his faction that he was contesting. He did not. He accepted each one with the measured grace of someone donating rather than conceding, someone performing magnanimity on a timeline they believed they controlled. He was, Harry thought, very good. The motion came from Umbridge. She rose from the 3rd row of the traditionalist block with the specific deliberate unhurry of someone who has practiced this movement and found the right pace for it. Her face was broad and her smile was applied at the exact tension of a smile that has been calibrated to communicate warmth to people 3 rows away. Her voice was high and clear and carried an undertone of regret that was structurally identical to the regret of people who are about to do something they have already decided on but want to be seen resisting. She read from a prepared document, the motion to invoke the Minor Stewardship Act of 1743, administrative guardianship for all 3-seat interests, the Chief Warlock as administrator for the Potter seat, the Heritage Committee for the Black seat, The Peveril seat held in abeyance as standard for unregistered claims. She said unregistered claims in the tone of someone closing a file. Point of order, Harry said. He had not raised his hand. He had not stood. He had spoken at the volume of a person making a factual correction across a room that was designed to carry voices, and the chamber's acoustics did the rest. Umbridge stopped mid-sentence. The chamber went completely quiet, not the quiet of a pause, the quiet of a recalibration, every person in the room simultaneously doing the same computation. Dumbledore said, with perfect procedural correctness, the member will be recognized. The Peveril seat is not an unregistered claim, Harry said. He was reading from nothing. He had memorized what he needed. Under the founding compact of 1397, the 7 founding house lines have seats registered in the original compact document, not in the Wisengamot register. The Minor Stewardship Act of 1743 applies specifically to Wisengamot registered seats. The Peveril seat exists prior to and independent of the Wisengamot administrative framework. He looked at Umbridge. She was looking back at him with the expression of someone who has stepped onto what looked like solid floor and found it'd give. The Act has no jurisdiction over the Peveril seat. Silence. One beat. Furthermore, Harry said, the Act requires that any seat to be administered have no active legal representative. Under the founding compact, Gringotts serves as legal representative for verified heirs of founding house lines during the establishment period. That representation is active. It was established October 14th and is documented in the session record. He turned a page in the ledger. The Potter and Black seats therefore also fall outside the Act's administrative provision. The motion is void on its face. Umbridge opened her mouth. The founding compact, Harry said, is a bilateral treaty between the Wisengamot and Gringotts. It cannot be amended by Wisengamot motion alone. It requires bilateral agreement. Gringotts' position is documented in the October 14th filing, entered into this session's record in the first 20 minutes. He looked at Dumbledore. If the Chief Warlock disputes my reading of the compact's jurisdictional scope, I am prepared to request that the Senior Director of Gringotts attend in an advisory capacity. He is available. The chamber processed this. Dumbledore removed his spectacles. He breathed on one lens and cleaned it with a cloth from his pocket, and he put them back on. The full 7 seconds. The chamber waited through all of it because when Albus Dumbledore cleaned his spectacles, rooms waited. The chair, he said, will take the question of the motion's procedural standing under advisement. Under the Wisengamot Procedural Rules, Section 9, Harry said, a motion challenged on jurisdictional grounds during presentation cannot be held under advisement. It must be ruled on or withdrawn. He opened the ledger to the tabbed page and held it up briefly, not theatrically, practically, the gesture of someone showing their citation rather than performing it. Section 9, Paragraph 3, the rule was added in 1887 to prevent procedural delay in contested hereditary proceedings. This is a contested hereditary proceeding. The silence this time was different. It had texture. Harry could feel the room redistributing itself around the fact of what had just happened, which was a 7-year-old citing the procedural rules of a 500-year-old governing body to the man who chaired it, correctly, in front of 40 witnesses. Dumbledore looked at him across the chamber. Behind the half-moon spectacles, something was happening that Harry had not seen in Dumbledore's face before, not in the anteroom, not in any of the documentation, not in the third letter from the Potter vault. It was a kind of reckoning, the specific private reckoning of an exceptional mind encountering something it had genuinely not modeled. The motion, Dumbledore said very carefully, as presented, cannot proceed. The jurisdictional challenge is, he stopped, he said it. Sustained. Umbridge sat down with the particular controlled dissent of someone managing humiliation. The motion is withdrawn, one of Dumbledore's factions said before Umbridge could speak, clean, tactically sound. Withdrawing rather than having it ruled void created marginally more flexibility for future motions. Harry noted this and closed the ledger. Lucius Malfoy stood. He rose from the Malfoy seat with the smoothness Harry had watched from the gallery, the same practiced economy, the same surface calm. He said, the Malfoy family moves to formally accept all 3 seat activations as filed, effective the verified bloodline date of October 14th. The chamber's attention pivoted. Several members of the traditionalist bloc turned to look at him. He did not look at them. He looked at the clerk's desk where the formal motion would be recorded with the forward focus of someone who has made a decision and is not interested in its social reception. A woman in the second tier, bones, gray-haired, direct, with the bearing of someone for whom the law was not a career but a personal conviction, said, I second the motion. Further second, said the Longbottom representative. He had tired eyes and had been watching Harry throughout the session with an expression that suggested he was processing something at depth, something that would take longer to fully surface than this session allowed. "The motion is to formally accept all 3 seat activations," Dumbledore said. His voice was level and measured and gave nothing away that had not already been given. "All members will vote." The clerk called the roll. Harry sat in the Potter seat and listened to the votes come in. He did not count aloud. He tracked them with the systematic attention of someone who has spent 3 weeks learning to read ledgers, treating each vote as an entry, running the sum. By the 22nd member, he knew the result. He kept his face even and listened to the remaining votes and did not change his expression when the final count confirmed what he already knew. 31 in favor, the clerk said, 4 abstentions, no votes against. Dumbledore picked up his quill. He dipped it. He wrote in the formal session record in his extraordinary handwriting, the handwriting that made every document it touched feel like a historical artifact. He said, "The Wisengamot formally recognizes the Lord Potter Black Peveril. The seat activations are accepted, effective October 14th. He set his quill down. He looked across the chamber. "Welcome to the chamber, Lord Potter." Harry looked at Dumbledore. "Thank you," he said. The chamber emptied quickly, the way rooms empty when something significant has occurred and people need the privacy of corridors to process it. The Bones woman nodded at Harry as she passed, not warmly, not congratulatory, just the acknowledgement of one practitioner to another. The Longbottom representative stopped and looked at him for a moment before saying, in a voice low enough that it was clearly intended for Harry alone, "Your grandmother would have been insufferable about this." In the best way, he moved on before Harry could respond. Marchbanks stopped at the foot of the Potter seat tier. She had her folder under her arm and her eyes were direct and not particularly warm, but were the eyes of someone deciding to be accurate rather than politic. "You cited Section 9 correctly," she said. "Most members forget Section 9 exists. It has been invoked 3 times in 80 years. She examined him. "You've been in Gringotts for 27 days. "Yes, reading law, among other things." She looked at him for 3 more seconds. "Come back when you're older," she said. "There is work to be done here that will need people who understand what it is." She left. Harry stayed in the Potter seat until the chamber had nearly cleared. He closed his ledger. He looked at the room, the tiers emptying, the lamplight unchanged by the session's conclusion, the stone walls holding their 5 centuries of argument without opinion. The Peveril seat at the top of the gallery had the same quality as when he'd left it 2 hours ago. Patient, certain, waiting for whatever came next. Dumbledore came down. He walked across the chamber floor at the deliberate, unhurried pace of someone who has been watched in this room for decades and has, long since, internalized the watching as part of the function. He stopped 8 feet from Harry, correct distance, not intimate, not dismissive. "You are extraordinary," he said. Harry said nothing. "I want you to understand," Dumbledore said, "that the choices I made were made under conditions you are too young to have experienced. Voldemort, the power he accumulated, the things he did, what I believed was coming, these were not abstractions. They were immediate and they were lethal, and the decisions I made were the best decisions available to me with the information and the resources I had." He paused. "I believe that." "I want you to know I believe it." "I know you believe it," Harry said. Something moved in Dumbledore's face. "The Dursleys were chosen for specific magical reasons," Dumbledore said. "Your mother's blood and her sister created a protection." "I know," Harry said. "Our curse-breaking team analyzed the enchantment. They explained it to me." He looked at Dumbledore. "The blood protection required me to call the house home. Did you confirm that I called it home?" Dumbledore was quiet. "Did you ever check?" Harry said, still quiet. "You used my parents' trust to fund the order," Harry said. "The debt notice was filed yesterday. You'll have received it." "Harry, I don't want an apology," Harry said. "I want repayment on the schedule Gringotts has outlined." He stood from the Potter seat. In the nearly empty chamber, the sound of the chair was distinct. "You have information I need. About Voldemort, about the connection, about what my parents knew and what they didn't tell anyone else. That information is worth a formal meeting. Gringotts can schedule it." He picked up his ledger. "If you want to work together against him, against what's coming, the process is to request a meeting through the proper channel. I will attend. I will listen. I will work with you on the things we agree on." He met Dumbledore's eyes directly. "But I don't operate on your timeline. I don't defer to your judgment on matters affecting my own life. And if you move against my legal standing again, through any mechanism, procedural or otherwise, I will use every instrument I hold, and I hold quite a few." You know what I hold? Dumbledore said nothing for a moment. Fawkes made his sound, the single descending note that was adjacent to music. I know what you hold, Dumbledore said quietly. Not defeated, something more complicated than defeated. Revised, the word of a man updating a model he had spent decades building on the assumption that its central variable would remain variable. He nodded, once. The proper channel, Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore said. The proper channel. Harry walked out. Ragnarok was in the public gallery. He had been there for the full session. Harry had known this without confirming it, the knowledge arriving the way certain kinds of certainty arrive, below the level of verification. They fell into step in the corridor without arranging it, moving toward the Gringotts passage at the same pace. Malfoy, Harry said. First installment arrived this morning, Ragnarok said, before the session at 8:47. He made the calculation last week. Earlier, Ragnarok said, he made it the day the acceleration notice arrived. He spent a week performing uncertainty and then paid before the session because paying before the session was more valuable than paying after. He looked ahead down the corridor. He has purchased with that timing the implication that his vote was independent rather than transactional. Was it? No, good, Harry said. I prefer transactional. Transactional is predictable. They walked. The Hogwarts board notification, Ragnarok said. The share transfer registered overnight. The board's administrative secretary will have the documentation this morning. They will want a meeting within 10 days. Schedule it. Phileas is already preparing the Hogwarts governance documents. They reached the Gringotts passage door. Ragnarok held it. Harry went through. The corridor smelled of chalk and deep water and the particular quality of very old stone that has been carrying weight for a long time without complaint. The legal obligation, Harry said, under the compact, Ragnarok said, is discharged as of the session's formal conclusion. He did not slow down. You are a recognized lord. The establishment period is complete. Gringotts has fulfilled the contingency protocol. I know, Harry said. They walked the length of the passage. The lamps were further apart here than in the Gringotts levels, older installation, older intervals, the spacing of a system that had been lit a long time ago and had never needed updating because the stone was consistent and the route never changed. The account will remain open, Ragnarok said. You keep saying that, Harry said. Because you keep asking, Ragnarok said. Harry was quiet for a step. I haven't asked today. You were about to. The passage opened into the lower Gringotts corridor and the warmth of the deep levels came up around them, the geological warmth of Earth that has not been near a surface in centuries. It felt like the first night. It felt like the wall under his hand in the corridor outside the anteroom. Honest, consistent, a thing being only and exactly what it was. The Hogwarts meeting, Harry said. I'll need the governance documents and the founding charter analysis. Phileas will have them by Thursday. The Malfoy structured settlement if he requests one after the query period, standard terms. I'll draft the framework and the Azkaban review for Sirius Black. Where does that stand? Ragnarok's pace did not change. The review petition has been filed with the Office of Magical Law Enforcement. Under the No Trial Incarceration Act of 1839, a formal review must be scheduled within 60 days of petition. We filed October 18th. The 60-day window expires December 17th. And if they delay past December 17th? Then we file for judicial compulsion in the Wisengamot, Ragnarok said, citing the act, and we do it with a Lord Potterblack Peveril as the petitioning party, which is a very different document than a Gringotts institutional filing. Good, Harry said. They reached the green parlor level. Ragnarok stopped at the corridor junction. This was where they usually split, Ragnarok to the director's office level, Harry to the study rooms or the parlor. Eat something, Ragnarok said. I'm going to the vault first. Eat something after. Harry looked at him. The carved face in the lamplight, the amber eyes that had been doing math on every situation they encountered for longer than Harry had been alive, the absolute professional stillness of someone who had added a line to an internal ledger and was not going to discuss it. All right, Harry said. He went to the Peveril vault alone. Griffook drove the cart and waited at the passage end at the point where the tracks stopped and the older stone began. He did not offer to walk with Harry. He sat with his hands on the cart rail and looked at the lamp and did not watch Harry go. The obsidian door opened as Harry reached it. He had stopped finding this remarkable. It was what the door did. It recognized what it recognized and opened accordingly, and that was a form of honesty Harry had come to rely on. Inside, the three objects on the stone table. The wand and the stone unchanged, untouched, patient with their particular qualities of waiting. The wand's dark wood with its faint grain. The stone's rough gray surface that required a conscious decision to look at directly. The cloth folded in its third position, the folds moving with their barely visible internal current. He picked up the cloak. The weight of it was the thing he had not prepared for, the weight of nothing, the physical fact of an object that had no mass that his hands could measure, that fell across his fingers in folds that caught no light and gave nothing back. He held it and it held nothing back, and that was the entirety of it, that absolute reciprocal absence. He stood in the vault and held it and thought about invisibility. 7 years of the specific invisibility that comes not from magical cloth but from categorical exclusion, from being processed as a problem, a liability, a variable to be managed rather than a person to be known. The Dursleys had not seen him. Dumbledore had seen something useful. The social worker who came twice had seen a narrative she needed to confirm. Teachers at school had seen a quiet, strange child who didn't make trouble and didn't receive Christmas cards and who would age out of their professional responsibility in due course. The goblins had seen him, not warmly, not with the sentimental weight of a found family story. They had seen him because seeing him accurately was a professional obligation, and they honored professional obligations with a rigor that the wizarding world's performed warmth had never managed. Griffook had cataloged the split lip and the two big clothes and the electrical tape on the jeans and had filed it in exactly the right place without editorializing. Ragnarok had read the basin and then told Harry the truth, all of it, without softening the parts that were hard to hear. Phileas had given him the lexicon without being asked. They had looked at him and said, "Here is what this is, here is what you are owed, here is the mechanism for collecting it." He put the cloak in his inside jacket pocket. It folded to nothing, to the size of a handkerchief, to the weight of a folded thought. The envelope was on the table where the cloak had been. He had not seen it before because the cloak had been covering it, lying folded over it, the absence of the cloak making it visible the way removing a hand from a surface reveals what was underneath. Sealed with wax that had gone the dark amber of extreme age, brittle at the edges, the seal pressing the outline of a bird into the wax. Not a griffin, not an owl. Something older with spread wings and a long tail, something between an eagle and a heron, the seal of a family that had stopped using it a century before his birth. His name on the front, Harry, not Lord Potterblack Peveril, not the heir, not any of the legal designations that had accumulated over the past 27 days like barnacles on the hull of his identity, each technically accurate and none of them him. Just Harry in handwriting he did not know but whose quality he could assess, small and precise and left-leaning, the scientist's hand he had been reading in the correspondence files, now addressing him directly. Below it, in a different hand, larger and less careful, and carrying the quality of someone who wrote fast because they thought fast and had accepted this as a permanent condition. Open when you're ready. There is no deadline. The second hand had underlined no deadline and then crossed out the underlining and then drawn it back in, the revision visible in the wax-dried ink, the evidence of someone deciding 3 times what emphasis to use and settling on none and then disagreeing. He opened it. 2 pages. First in his mother's hand, dense with theory and cross-references and the lateral thinking of a researcher who had been working at the edge of what was known and had to invent notation to describe what she found. He read it slowly, he read it twice. It was about the connection, the thing Ragnarok had described from the October 1981 analysis, the convergence between Harry and Voldemort that his mother had been mapping in the last weeks of her life. It was specific and technical and extraordinary in the way that good science is extraordinary, not flashy, not dramatic, simply precise in a way that made the universe feel more knowable rather than less. She had known. Not everything, but enough. She had known the shape of it and had written it down in a vault where only he could find it. And she had done this in the last days before Godric's Hollow, with Voldemort tracking them and Dumbledore pressing his judgment on their choices, and the war reducing the available options to a set of terrible ones, and she had still found time to write it down accurately, to leave it for him. He moved to the second page, his father's handwriting. The large, careless script, the words getting bigger and faster toward the bottom of the page the way they always did in the correspondence files, the man's thoughts consistently outrunning his hand and the hand making its peace with this halfway through every document. Harry, by the time you find this you'll already know the hard parts. Your mum has explained the theory better than I could. What I want to say isn't theory. We made choices that put you in danger. Not just Voldemort danger, the danger we signed up for. We made choices that assumed other people would do the right thing after we were gone. Your mum trusted Dumbledore more than I did, and I think I was right, and I'm sorry we didn't manage to resolve that before it mattered. If you're reading this, it means the contingency worked, which means Gringotts is keeping the debt records straight, which means you know what you're owed. Collect it, all of it. There's going to be a point where someone tells you that the right thing to do is to sacrifice yourself for something larger. I know this because your mom and I were told the same thing in a dozen different formulations. Some of those times it was even true. The trick is knowing which times. Dumbledore is very good at making all of them feel like the true ones. Don't let him. Use your own judgment. You come from two families of people with very good judgment and one family of people who invented three objects that have been catastrophic for everyone who used them without thinking it through. So maybe use the first two families as your reference point. The vault is yours, the seats are yours, the name is yours. We should have been there to give them to you properly. I'm sorry we weren't. Your mum is better at apologies than I am, but she's used up her space explaining the important things, so you're getting mine. Be difficult, be careful. Don't let them make you small. The last line was underlined, not revised. Harry read both pages in the vault, standing up by the light of the lamp that burned without apparent fuel. He read them with the systematic attention he had developed over 3 weeks of reading documents that mattered, the attention that moved through each line without rushing the next one. He folded them. He put them in the same pocket as the cloak. He stood in the Peveril vault for another moment. The stone walls, the lamp, the stone table with two objects remaining, the wand and the stone, patient and present and not requiring anything from him today. The vault had been waiting for 112 years, and it knew how to wait. He would come back. The wand would need to be addressed, and the stone was a problem he did not yet have the framework to approach correctly. He knew this the way he knew certain mathematical problems required techniques he hadn't been taught yet, not from inability but from sequence. He thought, I know what I am, not the boy who lived, which was a story someone else had written to serve their own plot, not the heir, which was a legal category. Not the cupboard child, which was what happened when a man decided that managed ignorance was a form of protection, and a woman followed the instruction, and a street of neighbors chose not to see what was in front of them. He was the convergence point of 3 lines that had been waiting, separately and together, for exactly him. He was the creditor of a debt that half of magical Britain didn't know it owed. He was the person his mother had written to in the last days before Godric's Hollow, trusting that he would find it, trusting that he would understand it, trusting that the mechanism she had designed would work. It had worked. He walked out. The door closed behind him with its characteristic silence, the silence of a door that did not need to make noise to be definitive. He ate dinner with Ragnarok. This had been, for 27 days, a thing that happened, not scheduled, not discussed. Ragnarok arrived at the green parlor with a second plate on the evenings when his schedule permitted, which was most evenings, and they ate while going over the day's developments, and this was practical and efficient and had never required naming. Ragnarok set the second plate down and opened his evening ledger. Harry set the letters on the table beside his plate. Ragnarok looked at them. I found them in the vault, Harry said, under the cloak. Ragnarok looked at the letters and then at Harry and then back at his ledger. He turned a page. Were they useful? Harry thought about this with the same care he brought to everything that mattered. The theory in his mother's hand, useful, was the smallest possible word for it. The theory was foundational. It was the map he hadn't had. It was the difference between navigating and being navigated. His father's letter, useful, was not the word for that at all. Yes, Harry said. Ragnarok nodded once and read his letter. Harry ate. The food was the same food as every night, the savory thing on warm plates, the bread, the dense tea, and it had been for 27 evenings the specific comfort of consistency, of a meal that no one could take away, of hunger that was not a scheduled condition but an ordinary biological state with an ordinary solution. He finished eating. The Hogwarts board, he said. When they come, what do they want? They want to understand the nature of the share transfer, Ragnarok said. The Potterblack Peveril Trust holds majority founding interest, which means constitutional level influence over the board's governance. They will want to know how that influence will be exercised. What do I want from Hogwarts? Ragnarok looked up. This was unusual. Harry asked, what is questions, and what does this mean questions, and what happens when questions? He did not typically ask, what do I want questions? That is your determination, Ragnarok said. Tell me what you'd use it for. I am a goblin banker, Ragnarok said. I would use it to reform the curriculum so that wizarding children are taught basic financial literacy and magical law before the age of 11, rather than having to discover in a bank at 7 years old that they have been systematically deprived of their own interests. He held Harry's gaze. But I have had this opinion for a very long time, and the Hogwarts board has not been responsive. They'll be responsive now, Harry said. Yes, Ragnarok said. They will. Harry was quiet for a moment. He thought about Hogwarts, which was a concept he knew from his mother's letters. She had loved it, had used words about it that she did not use about many other things, words that implied a specific kind of attachment, the attachment to a place that had been genuinely transformative rather than merely educationally adequate. "I want to go," he said. "When I'm 11, I want to go as a student, not as a political position." "Those are not mutually exclusive," Ragnock said. "I know, but I want 4 years first." He picked up his quill and opened the copy of the Hogwarts founding charter that Phileas had left on the table. 4 years to understand everything I need to understand before I walk into that building." He found the page he wanted. "What can I learn here?" "Everything," Ragnock said, "then that." 3 days after the session, on a gray Thursday that smelled of rain coming from the east, a ministry clerk named Millicent Hawthorne arrived at her desk on the 4th floor of the Ministry of Magic and found a stack of filings from the overnight routing. She had been a clerk for 11 years. She had processed filings through 2 minister transitions, a minor departmental reorganization, a custody dispute involving a dragon, and the filing of the 7th Amendment to the Quidditch Transportation Act, which had required 17 supporting documents and a footnote in Welsh. She was not easily surprised, and she was not paid to evaluate, only to stamp and root. She stamped, "Potter Trust, Wardship Authority terminated, effective October 14th. Stamp, root, Black Succession, Lordship activated, heir confirmed, Gringotts founding compact verification enclosed. Stamp, root. Peveril Succession, Lordship activated, founding compact provision, see attached." She looked at the see attached notation, turned to the attached document, noted that it was 37 pages of compact text and precedent citations, and stamped the header page and rooted the stack to the Heritage Archive, where it would sit for 40 years, until a magical historian cited it in a monograph about the compact's continuing relevance to modern succession law. Malfoy Black Credit Instrument, Acceleration Notice filed, full balance stated herein. She noted the figure without particular reaction. It was a large number, but large numbers crossed her desk regularly. Dumbledore, Albus Percival Wulfric Bryan, Personal Debt Notice, Trust Administrative Authority, balance stated herein. She noted this figure and looked at the name above it for 2 seconds longer than was strictly necessary. She stamped it. She rooted it. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Board of Governors founding interest transfer, Potter Black Peveril Trust, majority share, effective October 14th. She looked at this one, she put it down. She went back to the top of the stack and read from the beginning more carefully. 17 filings. She read each one through, starting with the compact verification and its 37 pages, which she had retrieved from the Heritage Archive routing pile on a professional instinct she couldn't entirely articulate. She read methodically and without rushing, and by the time she reached the 17th filing, she had a clear picture of what she was holding, which was the documentary skeleton of a restructuring of magical Britain's institutional landscape, so complete and so legally airtight that the only reaction her professional judgment could generate was a precise, compound admiration. She was not required to evaluate, she was required to stamp and root. She stamped each filing, she rooted each one to the correct office. She stacked the completed pile with the precision of 11 years of professional practice. Then she sat back in her chair and looked at the stack and thought about the fact that the verified heir at the center of every document she had just processed was a 7-year-old child who had been in this building's records, in one form or another, since October 1981, who had been categorized for 6 years as a wardship placement, a routine matter, a file with no active status requiring no active management. Not anymore. The stamp went back in its holder, the stack went to routing, the desk was clear. "Blimey," she said to no one in particular. He picked up the next filing because the stack did not wait, and the stamp did not evaluate, and one thing Millicent Hawthorne had always believed about institutional machinery was that it was most honest not when it was making dramatic decisions, but when it was doing exactly this: processing, routing, stamping, making things real one page at a time, the world reorganizing itself in the accumulated pressure of properly filed documents. She stamped. In a tower office in Scotland, Albus Dumbledore sat at his desk. The silver instruments on their brass stands had been rearranged. Not dramatically, he had simply moved the one that tracked the Potterward proximity to the back shelf, behind the one that monitored the western coastline for dark magic activity, so that it was present but not the first thing his eyes found when he looked up from his work. This was practical. He was a practical man. He had received the debt notice on Wednesday. He had read it, set it aside, and read it again on Thursday morning with fresh attention, which was his practice with documents that required a response he had not yet decided on. The figure was uncomfortable but not unmanageable. He had resources. He had always had resources, accumulated over decades of institutional standing and the specific generosity of people who believed in his work and trusted his stewardship. He was writing. He was not conceding anything he did not have to concede. He was very, very good at this, and he was aware of it, and his awareness of it had long since stopped troubling him because the alternative, being less good at it, being less strategic, being the kind of person who blundered through high-stakes situations with honest sentiment and no game theory, was a luxury that the situation had never permitted. What was troubling him in a way that was new and that he had not yet fully integrated into his operating model was the conversation in the chamber, not the legal argument. He had processed the legal argument quickly, revised his assessment of Harry's preparation, updated his threat model accordingly. The argument had been sound and he had acknowledged it correctly. The conversation after. One-on-one in the nearly empty chamber. Did you ever check? He had not checked. This was a fact, and he was a man who treated facts as information rather than accusations. But this particular fact had the quality of a structural deficiency rather than an oversight. Not a mistake he had failed to correct, but a mistake he had built the subsequent 6 years on top of, trusting the foundation, not inspecting the fault line. He had not checked. Fox on his perch made the soft sound, the descending note. "I know," Dumbledore said. He kept writing. The letter arrived in Harry's study room on Friday morning, delivered by a Gringotts runner rather than an owl, which meant Gringotts had processed it through the administrative channel correctly. It was sealed with the Chief Warlock's official seal, addressed through the proper form, Lord Potterblack Peveril, C.O. Gringotts Bank Heritage Department, and written in the extraordinary handwriting. Harry read it. He set it aside. He went back to the Hogwarts founding charter for 40 minutes, and then he picked up the letter and read it a second time, more carefully. The offer of information was genuine. You could tell this because Dumbledore was offering specific things, named things, not vague gestures of collaboration but actual content. The prophecy, the Voldemort Horcrux theory that his people had been developing, the full account of the night at Godric's Hollow, including the elements that had not appeared in any official record. These were not bait, they were currency offered at genuine cost by someone who had spent decades hoarding them and was now opening a negotiation. He was treating Harry as a counterparty. That was new. Harry set the letter on the desk. He picked up his quill. He wrote a response, formal, through the proper channel, accepting the meeting, proposing 3 dates, specifying that Ragnarok would be present in his advisory capacity as account director. He wrote it in the measured, precise register he had been developing for 3 weeks, the register that carried no warmth and no hostility and left nothing to interpret. He sealed it. He gave it to the runner, then he went back to the founding charter because the Hogwarts board meeting was in 8 days and he had work to do. That evening he went back to the deep levels. Not the Peveril Vault, he had been there 2 days ago and the door would open when it needed to open and he did not need to visit it on a schedule. He went to the Potter Vault alone in the last hour before the standard evening meal, with the specific purpose of finding something he had noted in the inventory and had not yet retrieved. It was in the glass document cabinet in the folder marked Personal Correspondence, archived. A photograph. He had seen it in the inventory notes and had moved past it because there had been other priorities and the photograph was not a document with legal significance and he had been reading for legal significance. He found the folder, he found the photograph. His parents. Not a formal portrait, not the kind of posed image he had seen in the official files, the engagement announcement photo with its still, formal smiles. This was taken outdoors somewhere green and they were laughing, both of them, at something outside the frame. His mother's face turned toward his father mid-sentence, her scientist's precision entirely absent, replaced by something completely unguarded. His father looking back at her with the specific expression of someone who is experiencing something they consider themselves unworthy of and haven't decided whether to mention this. The photograph moved. Wizarding photographs moved. He had known this from Ragnarok's description of the vault contents, but had not encountered it directly until now. They laughed. They looked at the off-frame thing. They laughed again. The loop was 8 seconds. He watched it for a while, the warmth of the deep vault around him, the geological patience of the stone, the lamp burning with its sourceless steadiness. He did not cry. His chest did something that was not crying but occupied adjacent territory. A pressure. A specific muscular response to the particular combination of recognition and loss that has no clean name in any language because the situation it describes is too common to require one and too specific to be adequately covered by the words that exist. He put the photograph in his inside pocket beside the letters, beside the cloak. The pocket was becoming crowded with the specific things that were his. The vault door closed behind him on his way out, the bronze door with its heavy mechanism and its centuries of use, and the sound it made was the sound of a mechanism designed to hold, engaging correctly, doing exactly what it was built to do. In the green parlor, the plates were on the table. Ragnarok was reading when Harry came in. He did not look up. Harry sat down, he ate. The food was the same as every night and it was warm and it was there and no one was going to take it. They worked through the evening's business. Phileas's Thursday delivery of the Hogwarts governance documents. The Malfoy query, filed correctly within the 15-day window, citing 3 specific figures in the calculation that would not survive scrutiny. The Azkaban review petition, which had received a formal acknowledgement from the Office of Magical Law Enforcement, signed by a deputy director rather than the director, which Ragnarok assessed as an indicator of institutional discomfort rather than engagement. "They're hoping it goes away," Harry said. "Yes, it won't." "No," Ragnarok said, "it won't." When the briefing was done, they stayed at the table in the ordinary way of people who have established, without discussing it, that the briefing's end is not a cue to leave. Ragnarok read. Harry had the founding charter open but was not reading it, was looking at the page without processing it, which was unusual and which Ragnarok noted without comment. "The photograph," Harry said. "I took one from the vault." "You are entitled to everything in the vault," Ragnarok said. "I know, I'm not asking permission." He was quiet for a moment. "It's them laughing, my parents." "I don't know what they were laughing at." Ragnarok turned a page. "There are probably people who know," Harry said. "People who were there, who remember what was happening that day." "Who would know the context?" "Probably," Ragnarok said. "Remus Lupin was a friend of my father's. He is a werewolf and is currently employed in the Muggle world. His address is in the Potter correspondence files." Harry looked at the founding charter page without reading it. "I would like to write to him through the proper channel formally so he knows what's happened and can make a choice. I can draft a standard." "No," Harry said. "I'll write it myself." "I'll need to know how to write personal correspondence on house letterhead." Ragnarok looked up at him. "Ask Phileas," he said. "He knows the forms." Harry nodded. He went back to the founding charter. The lamp made the room warm. The ventilation shaft moved its cool air through the gap in the far wall, and the deep levels below did their perpetual arithmetic, patient and accurate and continuous. The stone was warm. He turned a page. 3 weeks later, in a small flat above a Muggle bakery in Hertfordshire, a thin man with prematurely grayed hair and the careful stillness of someone who has been managing a condition for 20 years opened a letter delivered by a barn owl he had not seen in 6 years. The letterhead was Potter House, rendered in the family crest's deep red and gold. The handwriting was small and careful and slightly inconsistent, the handwriting of someone learning new forms and applying them precisely. "Dear Professor Lupin, my name is Harry Potter. I am the son of James and Lily Potter, and I am writing from Gringotts Bank, where I have been residing since October 14th. I am 7 years old. I understand this may be a significant amount of information to receive at once. I have been told you were my father's friend. I would like to know more about him and about my mother, if you are willing. I found a photograph of them laughing, and I don't know what they were laughing at. I am also in possession of a number of resources that may be relevant to your current situation, including an understanding of the Wisengamot's recent handling of the Werewolf Employment Provision Act, which I believe has been applied incorrectly to your case. If you are willing to meet, I would like to discuss both the personal and the practical. I appreciate your time. There is no obligation. Yours, Harry Potter, Lord Potterblack Peveril. Remus Lupin read the letter twice. He sat at his kitchen table for a long time. The bakery below was doing its morning, and the smell of bread came up through the floorboards, and the barn owl waited on the windowsill with professional patience, and outside the gray Hertfordshire morning went about its business entirely unaware of what was happening at a kitchen table 6 feet above the level of the street. He got up. He found a piece of paper. He found a pen because he had not owned a quill in 3 years. He wrote, "I am available whenever you are ready. Tell me where to come." He tied it to the owl's leg. He opened the window. The owl left. He sat back down. He thought about James Potter laughing. Thought about the specific context of a specific photograph. There had been a summer afternoon in 1978, the summer before 7th year, at the Potter's house in Godric's Hollow, when they had been playing Exploding Snap and someone had cheated. And the cheating had escalated in the way that cheating escalated among people who were very competitive and very fond of each other. And James had been laughing like that, turned toward Lily, who was also laughing. And the motion had been exactly what Remus imagined the photograph described. He thought the mechanism worked. He thought Boniface Flintlock, wherever you are, it worked. He thought about a 7-year-old in a bank, writing formal letters on house letterhead, doing the arithmetic that the world had failed to do on his behalf, and the thought was too large and too complicated to hold in a single sitting, so he set it down carefully, somewhere he could come back to it. He got up and put the kettle on. Outside, the owl was already gone, carrying its answer south toward London, toward the deep levels and the warm stone and the lamplight, and the child who was not waiting anymore, was working, was reading, was turning pages, was learning the names of the people who owed him things and the people who had paid, and the distinction between loyalty and compliance and the specific value of the honest transaction, was building something. The bakery smelled of bread. The morning did its ordinary work. In Hertfordshire and in London and in Scotland and in every place where the effects of a single morning in October were still propagating outward through the connected tissue of magical Britain, the world was becoming, in small specific increments, a different shape. One page at a time, one stamp at a time, one carefully chosen, precisely worded, formally filed piece of paper at a time, The stone was warm, the door was locked from the inside. Nothing from this point was going to move him without his permission.